Well, hello there. It is great to see you again, and welcome back to Advance Your Wealth with Homer Smith. I am your moderator, Ryan Ruff. It's great to be back with everyone today. And as always, I'm joined by my right hand man. That's Homer Smith, private wealth advisor. We're going to be diving into another wealth management related topic as we typically do here on the show. And we have a really interesting topic. It's one that we really haven't touched on before in the show, but boy, can it be just pertinent for some folks out there. And that is family banks. That's really the key of today's conversation. Family banks, they are a tool that some very wealthy families and individuals out there are utilizing for a number of different reasons. And they're being increasingly adopted more and more with families, in that high net worth spectrum. So today, Homer and I are going to be looking at whether or not a family bank is a viable solution for you and your family, and what some of the ramifications and parameters are within a family bank, to give you a clear picture as a whole on whether or not, again, this is a strategy worth considering. So with that, let's go ahead and bring Homer aboard and get right into it. Homer, good to see you today. How you doing, sir?
Hey Ryan, doing well. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as always. This is a different topic. We've double dipped in some topics before because there's a million different ways to talk about different wealth management strategies. But Homer, today this idea of family bank is pretty new. We're going to be examining this. What exactly, Homer? Let's just start here. What exactly is a family bank?
Yeah, I think it's important to really get clear on it because I think a lot of people and families with significant wealth think of like a trust they might set up with the idea that it works kind of like a bank for their family, providing loans and whatnot. But the reality is, when we think of it in terms for the families we deal with, we really look at a family bank as more of a formal legal entity with very specific rules that govern how the family can access the wealth, and how they're expected to pay back the money. This is not a gift. This is really designed truly as a loan, as a bank, trying to bring a lot more accountability into the process. And really, I think what we see a lot and why they're interested in this is to take some of the emotion out of the process when family members are requesting funds to do various things from the family.
So, Homer, let's dive into the purpose a little bit more. Tell me what exactly what types of initiatives would you say a family bank can help fund? Ultimately, why is it what is it used for?
I think it's important because I think one of the challenges we see that's mentioned by a lot of our wealthy families, especially a lot of the private business owners we work with, where they're founder led. They started with nothing, built this significant wealth, had a liquidity event, and now they have all these dollars, and their kids and grandkids are growing up in a much different financial situation from them, and they're concerned that these next generations aren't going to have the same entrepreneurial spirit and ability to build their own wealth, and rather more expect to live off of the family money. So, really, the idea of a family bank is to encourage entrepreneurship, starting businesses, and really being more thoughtful about how money is utilized within the family, where they're not just passing down the wealth, but they're really passing down more financial intelligence and more of the family values through a structure like this.
Yeah, let's get deeper into that here, Homer. Could you give me maybe an example of how a family bank might support a family and ultimately build up some of that financial responsibility among maybe the younger generation?
Yeah, I think one area a family bank might approach this is in the idea of college tuition and college education. And right now, we're seeing it quite a lot where kids graduate from college with a degree. Maybe that degree isn't in a field that has a lot of opportunity with it post graduation. And so the family might set up the terms of repayment to where they're required to work a certain amount during college to pay it back and learn what that some of that experience of working, paying back the loan, creating their own income and wealth along the way, that might hopefully influence their decision making during college and making sure, okay, if I have to pay this back, like for real, um, it might influence the type of major they go into and then how they approach the world after college. That's one of the main ones we see.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective there, Homer. And look, as we've had conversations about successful family businesses and these families that obviously the wealth is created through a business specifically, there are a lot of instances where the next generation looks up to that matriarch or patriarch, sees what they're doing in terms of the success of the business. They've hopefully been engaged in conversations leading up to this point, and they maybe have caught that business building bug themselves and are interested in that level of entrepreneurship. So, Homer, how in that instance would a family bank help a family member kind of scratch that business building desire itch, if you will?
And that's often exactly how it ends up working, where the family bank are set up to build new family wealth via entrepreneurship. Again, not just living off of the existing family wealth, but how do they continue that and build their own wealth? There's going to be intra-family loans or perhaps equity investments in the new venture or both. As an example, a patriarch might loan one of their daughter's funds to start a new consulting business and do it through a loan at a preferred rate. And the idea of this is that it's going to foster more creativity and build their capabilities into the next generation, or not just passing along, again, financial capital, or really learning to pass on this human capital, where often not just dollars flow to that next generation through these loans, but also support. So they might include business coaching and entrepreneurship coaching as a part of that loan process as well.
And Homer, look, banks are a pretty formal, legal entity, but when it comes to families, they loan each other, money frequently in a lot of informal ways. So, why, in a family bank sense, why should that remain so formal when family loans are so informal in different ways? Draw that line in the sand for us.
And this is one of the areas we've spoken about a couple of times in the past, and why we prefer more formal routes is if you go the informal route using intrafamily loans and different arrangements, more often than not, it can lead to conflict within the family. One member of the family is going to remember the arrangement different than the other. And oftentimes, if there's no documentation and the patriarch or matriarch passes away, there's going to be conflict among family members on repayment of loans or whether or not it was really a loan versus a gift. And so the formal structure of a family bank is going to, again, not only hopefully foster more of that entrepreneurship, business building, wealth building, but will also hopefully then help also avoid some of the family conflict that comes with these more informal arrangements that are out there.
Homer, as we're talking about this idea of a family bank, it's almost like the writing's already on the wall, but I feel like it's worth calling attention to it. And that is just the idea that a family bank, has a big advantage, I would say, of leveraging this is that it allows a family to use very customized, very tailored solutions to meet the demands of that family in particular. Could you elaborate on why that is obviously a big advantage of a family bank and why it's so important that somebody lean on the bank in that way?
Yeah, it's very different, as you allude to, working with a family bank versus a much larger banking institution. And these family banks tend to do best when they're able to customize the approach of the bank to the idiosyncratic nature of a particular wealthy family and their interest or their circumstances. Because every one of these families is different. They might have come up in a certain industry, and the family might have ongoing interest and continue to build out in that sort of an area. So to be able to tailor the bank and the terms and how it's structured to each family, I think is really important. um, and they can also be pretty complex because of the nature of them being very focused and bespoke. And so, some families will set it up as part of their, single family office and kind of run it through that structure, or that complexity might lend itself to being set up as a completely separate entity. And so, again, there's a lot of customization and individuality to how each of these families might set up the family bank for their family.
Of course, of course. And Homer, we had mentioned earlier in the episode that these family banks are usually leveraged by these high net worth individuals and families. But let's talk about it in a more grand or general sense, if you will. Is this a solution, this family bank idea? Is it only reserved for those high net worth folks, or is it an approach that might be able to be leveraged on a more broad scale by families that might not fall into that same wealth category?
That's a great question. I would say that it's definitely super rich families that are taking advantage of this more often than not. It doesn't mean that it can't work for a family that's still building wealth that wants to create the same opportunity for their next generations. And so it's definitely not the exclusive domain of the super rich. What I will say is that even for those super rich families, it's also not for everyone either. We do run into a number of families that when we first approach this kind of conversation, there's a lot of interest in it, but then at the end of the day, they don't want the complexity that comes with an ongoing process of reviewing what the family might be loaning money for. They simply just want the money to go in trust or in some other vehicle to the next generation. And so even with that level of asset, it may not be the best fit. So it's important to really look at the pros and cons of this type of a structure. Look at from the patriarch matriarch perspective, what are you trying to create for your family, and what kind of ongoing relationship do you want with a structure like this to determine if it really makes sense. But at the end of the day, really, families of almost any wealth level can set up this type of a structure.
Okay, that's good to know. I appreciate you clarifying that there. And Homer, look, you hit the nail on the head. This it's an ongoing, it's a complex structure. It takes effort, if you will, to manage and maintain. So with that being said, do families themselves set up and quote unquote run this family bank, or is that somebody that they should be enlisting the help of a professional in some capacity to do for them, but also alongside them? How does that work?
Yeah, I would say it's important that they're heavily involved, but it's never done, at least in my experience, without good experts around them to assist, advise on many of these structures, usually including wealth managers, good attorneys, good accountants. And they need help in a number of areas. I mean, one of those areas is simply just the structure of these loans and making sure there's going to be meaningful return on the investments and how those are set up. And having experience with other wealthy families and what they've set up is very helpful to advise families setting this up for the first time. I think other areas are, if you're going to be providing a loan for a business venture, for instance, having experts on your team that are skilled in doing due diligence on private deals is helpful to just understand, hey, is what's the viability of this type of structure. And then one of the areas that we enjoy quite a bit is on all the tax mitigation abilities, and how do we structure this in a way to minimize not only the tax for the family, but also how do we structure things to mitigate and try to minimize tax for the family member building this business. And if we can do it from the ground floor, there's a lot of things you can put in place from the beginning that could have a big impact on taxes down the road. So definitely, it's something that the family is going to be heavily involved with, which is why previously it's not for every family. But again, there going to typically be a pretty heavy reliance on other experts and professionals that they're going to bring in to make sure it works in the way that they're intending it to.
Of course, always helps to have that team of professionals on your side, especially when it comes to matters like these. But Homer, look, you had mentioned earlier this is a highly customized, a well-tailored solution for these high net worth families, but also families on a more broad scale that where this solution might be applicable to them. But again, because it's so customized, this is something that it takes a conversation really. So let's say there's a member of our audience out there that's intrigued by this idea and this conversation today, and they'd be benefiting from a conversation surrounding this. What would be the best way somebody could reach out to you and your team and just open up that dialogue to see if a family bank might make the most sense for them?
The best is always to reach out directly. You can email me. We'll have that up on the video as well as our website. And what I will say is, usually when we start these conversations, it's going to lead to a number of other questions in a number of areas. And usually this is building in a family bank is going to be part of a bigger picture review, call it stress test of your overall financial world, just to make sure that the family is set up to make this type of a structure work really well for the family. And so again, we can look at it as a single issue, but usually it's going to end up being a part of a bigger conversation because of the importance of how this might fit into your family values and how you want to drive that down through multiple generations. And it's just usually a bigger conversation than should we have a family bank or not.
Got it. Roger that. Well, for Homer, I really appreciate you carving some time out of your busy day. We're going to let you get back to serving your clients, and looking forward to jumping back on the next one with you.
Thanks, Ryan. Good to see you as always.
Of course, of course. And hey, look, folks, we want to take one final moment, as we always do on the show, and thank you all for stopping by and spending some time with us on the podcast today. If you took anything away from today's conversation surrounding a family bank and the different solutions within it, and of course, whether or not it's a solution for you and yours, and you benefited from this conversation, well, make sure you hit that subscribe button then on the platform that you did check us out on today. That way, you never miss out on a future conversation between Homer and myself, where we unpack these different wealth management topics that he's getting asked about, from clients and prospects and the whole nine yards, because ultimately we want these conversations to be beneficial for you and yours. Before Ryan, or excuse me, for Homer, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long, though. But we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Advance Your Wealth.